In the vibrant city of Benevento in southern Italy, a boy was born on July 25, 1880, who would become a beacon of charity and holiness, Giuseppe Moscati. His birth was welcomed with joy by his parents, Judge Francesco Moscati and Rosa De Luca, pious and fervent Catholics. From an early age, the family recognized something special in that child, with a serene gaze and a gentle heart. The grace of God already seemed to rest upon that little one. Giuseppe was the seventh of 9 children, and he grew up in an environment of virtue and discipline, shaped by the example of his father, a man of integrity and justice, and by the tenderness of his mother, a woman of deep prayer. From a young age, he learned to unite study with faith, showing a keen intelligence and a heart sensitive to others' suffering. His siblings remembered him as someone generous and always willing to help. The family moved to Naples, where Giuseppe spent most of his life. It was there, in the capital of Campania, that his vocation to medicine began to germinate. Not out of mere scientific curiosity, but out of a sincere desire to relieve human pain. Still young, he accompanied his mother on visits to the poor, bringing food, clothing, and words of comfort. These experiences forged in him a compassion that would mark his entire life. His path of faith naturally intertwined with his intellectual formation. Educated by the Jesuits at the Vittorio Emanuele College, Giuseppe was an exemplary student, standing out not only for his academic brilliance, but also for his moral uprightness. He recited the Rosary with fervor, went to confession frequently, and took part in Holy Mass daily, even when it required sacrifices. At the age of 12, he suffered a painful blow with the death of his brother Alberto, an army officer who died from a fall from his horse. Far from hardening his heart, this event deepened in him the awareness of life's fragility and the importance of living each moment in the light of eternity. The Christian faith was the refuge where he found comfort and the strength to go on. When he turned 17, Giuseppe entered the University of Naples to study medicine. He chose this career not as a way to attain prestige, but as a ministry of service. He wanted to become a doctor of souls and bodies, as he told his friends. His studies were intense, yet always permeated by prayer. During his university years, his reputation as a young saint began to spread. His classmates admired him for his humility, diligence, and serenity, while his professors saw in him a promising future. But Giuseppe was not seduced by praise. He knew that every gift comes from God, and he offered each achievement to him. In 1903, he obtained his doctorate in medicine with distinction. Soon after, he began working at the Hospital for the Incurables, one of the most important in Naples. There, among the abandoned and incurable sick, he found his true field of mission. In each patient, he saw the face of the suffering Christ and served with tenderness, never expecting any reward. Prayer was the source of his energy and discernment. Before every surgery, he would kneel and invoke divine help. He knew that science alone was not enough to heal. It was necessary to love. For this reason, he often refused to charge the poor, even going so far as to pay out of his own pocket for the medicines of his most needy patients. Giuseppe's dedication was tireless. He worked long hours, but he never neglected his spiritual life. He attended Mass daily, received communion with devotion, and spent hours before the Blessed Sacrament, where he found the strength to continue his mission. His faith and his science formed a harmonious unity. His fame as a saintly doctor spread throughout Naples. People from all social classes sought his help, not only for physical cures, but also for spiritual guidance. Many said that simply talking to him brought them peace and comfort. His presence was a blessing, and his words a balm. In 1906, when Mount Vesuvius erupted, causing panic throughout the region, Giuseppe did not hesitate. He ran to the hospital in Torre del Greco to help evacuate the patients, risking his own life. His courage and selflessness impressed everyone. To him, every human life was sacred. Amid so many activities, he never gave up studying. He believed that a doctor should always be up to date to better serve. He published respected scientific papers and was appointed a university professor. But his true passion lay at the patient's bedside, where he could be an instrument of divine mercy. His kindness was contagious. Co-workers, even the most skeptical, recognized his noble soul. He never argued or lost his temper, preferring silence and prayer in the face of difficulties. When conflicts arose, he intervened with meekness and a spirit of peace. Many witnessed episodes in which Giuseppe seemed to have a special gift of diagnosis. He detected illnesses that examinations did not reveal and prescribed treatments with an intuition that defied logic. He believed the Holy Spirit guided him in each medical decision. For him, medicine was also a form of prayer. It was not uncommon for him to spend sleepless nights caring for patients in critical condition. When he returned home, he often did not rest but went straight to church to thank God. His body suffered, but his soul was at peace. He was a martyr of charity, consumed for the sake of others. He had a deep devotion to the Eucharist and to the Virgin Mary. He always carried a rosary in his pocket and prayed it in the pauses between visits. The Mother of God was his confidant, to whom he entrusted each patient, each decision, each concern. He called her his heavenly physician. He was not swayed by worldly fashions or the winds of relativism. He firmly upheld Christian morals, especially in the face of medical advances that disregarded human dignity. He never agreed to take part in practices contrary to Christian faith and ethics. In the world's eyes, Giuseppe was merely an excellent physician, but to those who knew him, he was a living saint. It was common to see him visiting the sick in their homes, bringing not only care, but also hope. Many times he discreetly left money under poor people's pillows. The city of Naples, with its contrasts between wealth and misery, was the apostolate field where Giuseppe heroically lived the commandment of love. He did not seek recognition, but the salvation of souls. He knew that true success lay in being faithful to God's will. His office, though modest, was frequented by prominent figures of society. Nonetheless, he treated everyone with the same kindness. To him, there was no difference between a prince and a beggar. All were children of the same Father. That sense of universal brotherhood was the fruit of his intimacy with Christ. Sometimes, after a long day's work, he still found time to write letters of encouragement to patients and friends. His words, infused with faith and wisdom, comforted troubled hearts. He was a true apostle of hope in times of great suffering. The years went by, but Giuseppe remained faithful to his mission. He rejected offers of prestigious positions that would distance him from the sick. He did not want a brilliant career, but a life offered. His heart burned with charity, and that flame never went out. He was also an educator. As a university professor, he formed not only competent doctors, but also disciples of ethics and compassion. His students deeply respected him and saw him as a role model. He told them that a doctor must be a priest of pain, someone who enters the mystery of human suffering with reverence. In all things, he sought the glory of God. He never attributed to himself the merit of healings, but pointed to the Lord. Medicine, he said, is a science that kneels before the Creator. And Giuseppe knelt often, aware that he was only an instrument in the hands of the divine physician. Giuseppe's soul was like a silent altar where charity burned day and night. Although his body was worn down by the burden of his mission, his spirit was constantly renewed in prayer. He understood suffering not as an absolute evil, but as a path of redemption and an encounter with the crucified Christ. The wars that ravaged Europe in the early 20th century did not leave him indifferent. During World War I, he devoted himself entirely to the wounded and mutilated, treating soldiers and their families for free. He saw in them not only injured bodies, but also torn souls in need of God's loving presence. In times of scarcity, Giuseppe did not hesitate to share the little he had. His personal resources were almost entirely directed to the poor, and many times he deprived himself of what was necessary. His life was a continual offering, a daily offertory laid on the altar of Christian charity. Those who knew him most intimately bore witness that his life was a continuous communion with God. He did not limit himself to external religious practices. He lived immersed in the divine presence. His prayer was silent and profound, and it permeated all his actions, even the simplest ones. He had the habit of meditating daily on the passion of Christ. This contemplation led him to a profound identification with the suffering of others. For him, serving the sick was like wiping the face of Jesus on Calvary. This vision transformed his medical work into a true redemptive mission. One of the most moving aspects of his life was his capacity for listening. Even amid the hospital rush, Giuseppe gave his full attention to each patient, listening not only to physical symptoms, but also to the pains of the soul. Listening for him was a form of divine welcome. His trust in providence was unshakable. He never worried about the future or about material difficulties. He frequently repeated, "God will provide." This simple yet firm faith was contagious. Many who came to him just for a medical consultation left touched by renewed hope. On Sundays, even after an exhausting week, he was often seen visiting hospitals, nursing homes, and health facilities. He brought words of consolation, prayers, and sometimes the Eucharist. In every suffering face, he saw the living presence of the Lord, and he served with joy. He had great zeal for chastity, living celibacy with purity and freedom. He offered his body and his heart totally to God and to the service of others. He never married, for he felt called to belong entirely to Christ. His life was an undivided gift. Amid the temptations of the modern world, he stood firm in the truth of the gospel. He was a moral beacon in a time of great ethical confusion. He never negotiated his principles, even when it brought him criticism or misunderstanding. He preferred to please God rather than men. His office, though simple, was a true sanctuary. Many patients said they felt a special peace upon entering. There was always an image of the Sacred Heart and a crucifix on his desk. Everything exuded faith, trust, and compassion. For Giuseppe, the environment was also part of healing. He had great spiritual discernment. He knew how to recognize when an illness had physical or spiritual causes. Therefore, he always recommended to his patients not only medical treatment but also confession and the Eucharist. He was a true counselor of souls, a physician who healed with science and prayer. Because of his faithfulness to the gospel, he also attracted many slanders and criticisms. Some envious colleagues accused him of fanaticism, while others considered him naive. But he never retaliated. He disliked conflicts and responded with silence and prayer. He was a true imitator of Christ. Once, he treated a child in a very serious condition. The doctors had already lost hope. Giuseppe knelt by the bedside and, after a brief prayer, made the sign of the cross on the girl's forehead. A few days later, she was cured. Many regarded this as a miracle. Despite these extraordinary manifestations, he never boasted. He always attributed everything to God's mercy and the intercession of the Virgin Mary. His heart remained humble, aware that he was only a useless servant in the Lord's vineyard. In his final years, his physical exhaustion became more pronounced. The long workdays, the fasts, and the sleepless nights took their toll. But he did not slow down. He continued treating, teaching, visiting, and praying. He was like a candle consuming itself to give light to others. Those who saw him in the hospital corridors said his gaze conveyed peace. He never showed impatience, even in the most stressful situations. His presence was like a balm, and many staff members sought him not only as a superior, but also as a spiritual father. Giuseppe's love for Jesus in the Eucharist was the center of his life. He did not go a single day without receiving communion. He said that communion was the food that sustained his mission. For him, the consecrated host was Christ himself, living, present, active. This faith nourished his charity. On one occasion, an elderly lady who could not pay was treated by him. After the consultation, as she tried to thank him with a few coins, he smiled and replied, "Give this to someone needier. The payment I want is a Hail Mary for me." Such was his soul. Even those who did not share his faith recognized his holiness. Atheists, Jews, agnostics, they all perceived something extraordinary in him. The light of Christ dwelling in him was evident and shone through every gesture, word, and silence. He often wrote spiritual meditations and prayers in his personal notebooks. These writings, discovered after his death, reveal the depth of his interior life. There we find pleas for humility, desires for holiness, and ardent love for Christ. He sought neither glory nor recognition. He avoided interviews, declined awards, and fled from the spotlight. His only desire was to do God's will. This inner freedom made him light and available. His life was like a silent hymn of praise and service. At the height of his professional activity in 1927, Giuseppe received clear signs that his health was declining. He felt pain, fatigue, and his heart seemed weaker. Yet he did not stop his mission. On the contrary, he intensified his visits to the poor and the sick. On April 12, 1927, as usual, he attended Holy Mass and received the Blessed Sacrament. He returned to his office, saw some patients, and at the end of the morning withdrew in prayer. He was found lifeless, sitting in his chair with a rosary in his hand. His death caused great commotion in Naples. Thousands of people from all social classes came to say their farewells to the saintly doctor. The wake was a true testimony of faith and gratitude. Many were already asking for his intercession, certain that he was in heaven. The body of Giuseppe Moscati was buried in the cemetery of Poggioreale in Naples, but his spirit still seemed to be present among the sick, the doctors, the poor, the students. Reports of healings and graces obtained through his intercession began almost immediately after his death, as a visible sign of the holiness of his life. The faithful, moved by the heroic witness of the doctor of the poor, began to visit him frequently, praying at his tomb. That place became a constant pilgrimage site. It did not take long for the church to begin a deeper investigation into his life and the graces attributed to his intercession. His former patients, friends, students, and colleagues gave moving testimonies about his character, kindness, and faith. Many wept as they recalled all he had done for them, not only as a doctor but as a true apostle. He was remembered as someone who lived for others, who loved without measure. During the beatification process, extensive documentation was gathered. Letters, medical prescriptions, notebooks of spiritual notes, testimonies, and hospital records revealed a man of science and prayer, a modern saint whose life was a continual yes to God. Everything pointed to heroic sanctity. In 1930, just 3 years after his death, his remains were transferred to the Church of the Gesù Nuovo in central Naples. There, in the heart of the city he loved and served so much, his tomb became even more accessible to devotees. People said, "He was ours, now he belongs to everyone." The fame of Giuseppe Moscati's holiness spread throughout Italy and beyond. Catholic doctors came to see him as an ideal patron for their profession. Modern medicine, marked by growing ethical challenges, found in Moscati a model of balance between science, conscience, and faith. Several miraculous healings attributed to his intercession were carefully analyzed by the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. Among them stood out that of a man with leukemia who, after praying for Moscati's intercession, made an inexplicable recovery in the eyes of medicine. The miracle recognized for his beatification involved the healing of a boy with a severe case of meningitis. The doctors had lost all hope, but after a novena by the family to Saint Giuseppe Moscati, the child recovered completely. Science could not explain what had happened. On November 16, 1975, Pope St. Paul VI beatified Giuseppe Moscati in St. Peter's Square. In his homily, the Holy Father extolled the figure of the Christian doctor who lived his faith in daily life, serving with humility and holiness in the modern world. He was a shining example for healthcare professionals. A few years later, another even more documented miracle was recognized. This time, it concerned a woman with an incurable tumor who, after invoking Blessed Moscati, showed a complete regression of the disease, with no plausible medical explanation. This opened the way for his canonization. On October 25, 1987, Pope St. John Paul II canonized Giuseppe Moscati, proclaiming him a saint of the Universal Church. The ceremony, celebrated before thousands of faithful, was a moment of great emotion. The pontiff called him the saint of modern times and a witness of God's mercy among the poor. In his homily at the canonization, St. John Paul II highlighted Moscati's example as a man who united faith and science, spirituality and action, prayer and service. He said that Moscati represents a model of accessible holiness, especially for lay people and healthcare professionals. His life is a call to holiness in everyday life. From then on, devotion to St. Giuseppe Moscati spread even further. Churches, hospitals, health centers, and medical associations began to adopt him as their patron. His image began to appear in many offices, reminding doctors that their work is a service to life and human dignity. In Naples, the Church of the Gesù Nuovo became the center of devotion to St. Giuseppe. There, before his tomb, the faithful place flowers, candles, and notes with requests and words of thanks every day. The atmosphere is one of deep reverence and hope. Many still claim to receive graces after praying there. St. Giuseppe Moscati also became an inspiration for seminarians, committed lay people, and young doctors. His life demonstrates that holiness is not reserved just for monks or priests, but is possible in any state of life, including science and medical practice. His example strongly resonated with the Second Vatican Council, which sought to highlight the universal call to holiness. Moscati, a layman, scientist, teacher, and servant of the poor, perfectly embodied this vocation lived in the world without fleeing from contemporary responsibilities. St. Giuseppe's spirituality was profoundly Eucharistic. He lived centered on Christ, present in the consecrated host. Many testimonies recount how, upon leaving Mass, his face lit up with joy. He said that there he received the strength to confront the world's sufferings. His writings also reveal a deep trust in divine providence. One of his notes reads, "It is not enough to examine the body, one must know the patient's soul, and this is done with faith and love. Without charity, medicine is a cold science." Saint Giuseppe Moscati's life is a concrete response to the ethical challenges of modern medicine. He showed that it is possible to practice science with competence while also remaining faithful to Christian principles. He was a defender of life from conception to its natural end. In his advice to medical students, he firmly insisted that a true doctor must not treat pain with indifference. He taught that empathy, compassion, and listening are just as important as technical knowledge. The doctor's soul, he said, must be moved by love. His canonization rekindled among Catholics the desire to unite faith and profession. Catholic hospitals began to invoke his name, and his relics were taken to various countries. He became the intercessor of the sick, of doctors, of teachers, and of all those who strive to serve others with dignity. Moscati's spiritual pedagogy is profoundly relevant. He shows that science can be a path to holiness when guided by love for God and neighbor. His life stands as a witness against the practical atheism that so often empties professions of their deepest meaning. In times of pandemic, many turned their eyes to Saint Giuseppe Moscati. Doctors and nurses, exhausted in ICUs and overcrowded hospitals, found in him a model and a heavenly friend. His example became even more significant as a beacon of hope in the darkness. Moscati's figure continues to inspire films, books, plays, and academic studies. His story touches both believers and non-believers because it reveals a coherent life, a life of integrity, dedicated to doing good. He is living proof that holiness is possible even in the midst of modern chaos. In the silence of his tomb in Naples, many still find consolation. His image, with his white coat, crucifix around his neck, and serene look, continues to radiate peace. For the countless who suffer, Saint Giuseppe Moscati remains a sign that God cares, heals, and saves. Over the years, the example of Saint Giuseppe Moscati gained continued relevance, especially in times of moral and spiritual crisis. He became a reference point for those who wish to live the faith authentically and concretely in the realities of the modern world, without compromising gospel values. Many healthcare professionals have found in him not just a patron, but a true spiritual mentor. Courses on bioethics, medical spirituality conferences, and prayer groups in hospitals began forming in his name. He was seen as the link between science and faith, between technique and love. In Catholic schools, especially in Italy, Moscati has been proposed as a model for young people, not as a distant hero, but as a close friend who walked the path of holiness with simplicity and fidelity. His life showed that it is possible to live with rectitude even in secular environments. His spiritual writings have become the subject of study and meditation. Phrases like, "Anyone who does not believe in God cannot understand suffering," or "Science cannot console an afflicted soul, only love can," have become maxims quoted in homilies, spiritual books, and retreats. His fame also reached Latin America, where popular devotion quickly embraced him with enthusiasm. Churches and chapels took his name, and his relics were taken to several countries, especially those marked by social inequalities and precarious healthcare services. Devotion to Saint Giuseppe Moscati transcended confessional borders. Many Christians of other denominations, and even non-Christians, began to admire his witness. His life was like a living parable of God's love, understandable even to someone who had never entered a church. In Rome, his figure is often invoked at conferences on the Christian vocation in the world. He is cited as an example of what it means to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, fully living one's profession without losing one's soul. His holiness offers a concrete response to our time's ethical dilemmas. In his hometown of Benevento, there is particular devotion. Children receive his name at baptism, and entire families pray novenas asking for his protection. He is considered a distinguished son who brought his city's name to the entire world, not through human glories, but through his holiness. The liturgical cult of Saint Giuseppe Moscati is celebrated on November 16th, the date of his beatification. On that day, masses in his honor are held by doctors and nurses, and many testify to graces received through his intercession. He became an icon of lay holiness. Each generation rediscovers and reinterprets his story. Young doctors, facing the bureaucratic coldness of healthcare systems, see in Moscati an example of how the profession can be lived as a mission. His witness renews hope that it is possible to humanize medicine. In times of technological advancement and artificial intelligence in medicine, Saint Giuseppe Moscati reminds the world that the human heart is irreplaceable, that touch, gaze, and listening are just as therapeutic as any medication. He teaches that the doctor's soul is what truly heals. Many miracles continue to be attributed to his intercession: diseases deemed incurable, unexpected conversions, solutions to impossible problems. These are signs that God continues to act through his faithful servant. The reputation of his intercession spreads like a living flame. His example is particularly encouraging for those suffering from incurable diseases. By invoking his name, many feel relief, comfort, and a mysterious peace. They know he understands their pains, for he dedicated his life to serving the sick with gospel love. In a world that so often worships success, Moscati points to the way of the cross. His life was marked by renunciations, discretion, and fruitful silences. He did not shine from pulpits or stages, but in hidden daily life, where true love is tested and purified. Italy remains the center of his devotion, but over time, devotional centers have arisen in countries like the Philippines, Poland, Brazil, and Mexico. Tales of healings, conversions, and religious vocations connected to him multiply, echoing his life of self-giving. In many dioceses around the world, lay movements have gathered under his inspiration, seeking to unite spiritual life and professional activity. Healthcare workers, educators, and social workers find in him a patron and a model who encourages them to sanctify daily life. In times of moral relativism, Moscati teaches that one can live the truth with charity, that one can be firm without being harsh, and faithful without being fanatical. His life is a synthesis of strong principles and a tender heart, of solid doctrine and concrete love. His witness also inspired cinema. The film Giuseppe Moscati, Doctor to the Poor, sometimes titled Giuseppe Moscati, Healing Love, produced in Italy, presented his life to millions of people. The production delicately portrays his vocation, his dilemmas, and his unshakable trust in God, touching hearts worldwide. Many who watched the film or read his biography felt the desire to reconcile with God, to change their lives, to live more generously. His story is a call to conversion, to surrender, to the holiness attainable in daily life. He is like a mirror reflecting Christ. By canonizing him, the Church proposed his life as a path for everyone: lay people, single people, professionals, scholars, public servants. Moscati showed that the gospel can be lived in universities, in hospitals, on the streets, not only in monasteries or temples. His figure is particularly relevant in the new evangelization, for he attracts the distant through his serene humanity and unpretentious faith. Many who would not approach a priest or a sermon come closer to Moscati and let themselves be touched by his gentleness and example. He teaches that faith is not an ornament but the soul of everything, that science, far from being an enemy of faith, finds in it its highest inspiration, that suffering, if welcomed with love, becomes a path to salvation, that charity is the true measure of holiness. His legacy will continue as long as a human heart suffers, as long as there is a doctor fighting for dignity or a soul seeking holiness in the midst of the world. Saint Giuseppe Moscati has not died. He lives on in the silent intercession that continues to bring about miracles of healing and faith. May his example help us to see Christ in those who suffer, to sanctify our daily work, and to offer every gesture, every effort, every pain to the heart of Jesus. Like him, may we be light in the darkness, hope in affliction, witnesses that God walks with us. And at the end of our lives, may we also hear the words that the Lord surely spoke to his faithful servant Giuseppe Moscati. Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Saint Giuseppe Moscati, pray for us